Welcome back to Live With, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today's guest is an oldie but goodie. I know you guys like when we go back to the 90s. Well, we're digging deep now, and we're going back to the Gold's Gym Venice days back in the 90s. Nationals, North American, USA Championships, one of the top guys in the business. Disappeared from the industry. We're going to find out where he's been. I'd like to welcome Arne List to the show.
Hey Dave, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Arne, for joining us, man. You were a stalwart there at Gold's Gym Venice for a number. How many years were you there for?
Well, I got there in '91, and I left. I made my exit in 2000, right after the USA in New York.
Yeah, I mean, you were a top guy. You won the North American light heavyweight class back in '95. You were second at Nationals in '96. Both, by the way, both placings that would have earned you a pro card in today's day and age. By the way, just for your purposes.
So I've heard.
Yeah.
So I've heard.
And you were out there training guys at Gold. Were you originally from California?
No, I grew up in Vermont.
Wow.
Montpelier, Vermont.
That's a big trip.
Yeah.
What made you decide to go to Venice, and how did that happen? Give us the whole, historical perspective.
Yeah, so I actually, it's pretty neat how it happened. When I was a senior in high school, they held the first and probably only Mr. Vermont Scholastic Bodybuilding Championship. So high school bodybuilding championship. So I won that show, and in that show, up from Long Island was Wayne DeMilia.
Okay.
So Wayne DeMilia was there to watch the show, and he said to the promoter, he said, "This is really sad." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "This kid is on drugs." And he goes, "No, he's not." And he said, "Oh yeah, he is. You can't get in that kind of condition without being on steroids." And he said, "Well, no, he's not. He's like my little brother. I do his diet. We train together, but he's just very disciplined."
Let me cut you off. Was that when Rick Poston was running that show, or no?
No, that was a guy named Peter Sweeney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just a local show, and so then Wayne said, "Well, then I'd like to meet him." So I got to meet Wayne, and I didn't know who he was at the time, and then we started talking. And, I went on to tell him I wanted to be Mr. Olympia by the time I was 35 and want to be a movie. Didn't say anything about the movies. Because he knew the other side of bodybuilding, this is what he told me. He said, "Hey, Arne, this bodybuilding thing, don't get really too far into it. What you really might want to do is take voice lessons and get into making movies. You'll do really well. You're a good-looking guy, nice body, this and that. You got a good head on your shoulders. Seem like a good kid. Why don't you go down that route?" So, like us, how we work in bodybuilding, once we get our mind on something, we don't let go of it. Yeah. So I didn't leave him alone. I said, "Well, what do I have to do to qualify to be in the Nationals?" And he said, "You have to win a state show." I said, "Okay, when's the next one?" He's like, "Huh?" So the next state show was in a few weeks. It was in West Virginia.
Wow.
So I said, "Well, yeah, I'll see you there."
So you went all the way from Vermont to West Virginia to compete, huh?
Yep. I flew down to West Virginia. I was 18 I think I was 18 at the time. I weighed 143 pounds. Same height I am now, about. And I beat the guy in the overall. The guy weighed like 225.
Wow.
And, he was, doing his thing. And so then I went from there to, I went to the Nationals in New Orleans. And I went
what, bantamweight?
No, I was a lightweight, 143. Okay. Come on, Dave. Oh, come on, don't go there like that.
145? Right? No, 145 is bantamweight cutoff.
I don't know. So I was even smaller than I thought I was. That's the point. So I went to the Nationals in New Orleans, and I was totally natural, and that was a big eye opener.
Yeah.
I got crushed. They didn't even look at me. Actually, you know what? I think the only person that looked at me was the judge that was trying to get me to go to his hotel room after the show.
There was a lot of that back in those days, too. Yeah.
I'm sure. So what happened was, after my weight class, I went and sat behind Wayne, like as maybe Wayne and a few other people.
Yeah.
And this guy comes up to me and he starts telling me how wonderful I look and this and that. And I'm like, I'm a kid from Vermont. I don't know what's going on, right? So the next thing I know, he's got his hand on my leg and he's like, let's go to my room and talk about it. He gets up to leave to go get something. And I said to Wayne, I leaned forward, I go, Wayne, this guy's trying to get me to go to his hotel room with him. He's like, Arnie, get up here. And so and then from there, I kept after it and I finally got put in touch with a guy in New York. I don't know if you know the name Bob Gruskin.
Of course, Bob.
Yeah, I worked with Bob. Was the first guy that helped me with my chemistry.
I didn't know that you knew Bob. I didn't know you were a Gruskin guy.
Well, I was originally. He was in the area, and so I went from there back to the Nationals. I think I finished 9th, and then from there I went to the Mr. World International in Belgium in Antwerp. That's where I went. Barry DeMay's brother Jurgen, I beat him there for the overall.
Oh my God, that's cool.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool because Jurgen's brother was very well known, and he was the winner. They did it by height class, so I was the short class, he was the tall class, and I won that show. I beat him, and that was the beginning. And actually, what happened right before I went there. I trained in Manhattan for a month at all the gyms in Manhattan, and it was the first time I got to meet Arnold. So
really? Where did you see Arnold?
Yeah. Well, Wayne was good friends with Arnold. Wayne had been the Mr. Olympia promoter for many years, and he was also involved with the movie Pumping Iron, and so he knew Arnold very well over the years. And I was training at, I think it was Madison Avenue Muscle. I don't remember which gym, but for some reason that gym rings a bell. And Wayne called the gym and he said, hey, when you finish, there's going to be a big limousine out front. Just get in and don't ask any questions. And I'm like, right. And I'm like, okay, Wayne, as long as I don't end up chopped up in pieces.
Yeah, exactly, right.
So I come out of the gym and there's this big blue limousine on the curb, and I get in and it's just me and the driver, and it's Arnold's limo.
Oh shit.
So this guy brings me to one of these really fancy Italian restaurants in Manhattan. They're playing the violins and they're wearing tuxedos.
And you're in gym clothes, yeah.
I'm in my gym clothes. I just walked out of the gym. I'm in my gym clothes. So I'm a week away from going to the World Championships, and I walk in and I'm like, and the maitre d' sees me, waves me over. So I go over. He says, "Go to the stairs. Everybody's waiting for you." I go to the stairs, and there's a big guy there. He pulls the red velvet rope back. He goes, "Oh, you're the main attraction. Go ahead on up." I have no idea, right? I have no idea what's going on, right? I'm a kid from Vermont. I just fell off the turnip truck, the whole thing practically. So I go up the stairs, and the whole second floor is closed off, and sitting at a table is Wayne and Arnold and a husband and wife and their little boy. Their little boy was 11 years old, and he was about the size of a 6-year-old. He had leukemia.
Oh, terrible.
And Arnold was Arnold was doing an appearance for the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Oh, okay.
So it was so amazing. I mean, we idolize people when we're kids and stuff, and there was no cameras there. There was nobody was there to report it or show this. It was just me and Wayne and Arnold and this husband and wife. And the little kid, it was so cute. He didn't even know who Arnold was. He wanted to meet Commando.
That's great.
Right? So he wanted to meet the guy in the movie.
Sure.
So Arnold was there, and just to see him interact with this little kid in such a moment of compassion and charity. Yeah. And he's like, he had me take my shirt off, and he's like, "Look at the muscles, they're amazing." And I'm like, doing all this stuff.
He made you pose and everything in the restaurant?
Yeah. So, hold
on, let me ask you a question. Let me stop you for a minute. When Arnold tells you to take your clothes off and start posing, I mean, you got to be a nervous wreck, right? I mean, you're thinking, Arnold's critiquing me here, right?
So, at that time, it didn't strike me like that. I had been... I really didn't know much about bodybuilding, and I just the magazines and stuff. But it didn't really hit me until later how profound that moment was for me in my life, and how the trajectory of my life through. I had read his book. I think I mentioned this to you briefly when we talked a little bit. My mom, when she saw how much I was into working out, she bought me the book that he wrote called The Education of a Bodybuilder.
Right.
and I read that book. I mean, I ate that book when I was 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he there's 2 chapters in there. I don't know if you've read it. One is called visualization.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about how you have to visualize what you want in your life and hold it there as long as you can.
Sure.
And then the very next chapter is called actualization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about taking as much action as you can to do whatever you think is going to get you to what you want in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they call it the secret and, you know, the law of attraction and everything. But Arnold was talking that talk when I was, 15. And I used it from the time I closed that book, and probably, 7 years later, here I am in front of him, with him at this moment, just him and I and Wayne and this little kid and their parents. And, you know, that taught me that this stuff works, man. I mean, they had the bodybuilding and the exercises and all that, but what I got from that book and what I got from bodybuilding
mm-hmm.
was really the mindset.
Sure.
It's all about mindset and where you want your life to go, and, you know, be careful what you wish for, because if you hold it in your head long enough, you're going to end up where you want to be.
Yeah, I tell people that you get what you think about, whether you want it or not. Really, is what it amounts to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why it's so important that we feed our mind with good things. You know, good things that are positive, unless you don't want that kind of life. If you want, you know,
if you want misery, you think about miserable things.
Yeah, and that's why they, you know, a positive attitude and a positive mindset will bring positive things into your life. If you're stuck in the negativity and the woe is me and the this and that, you're probably going to get compounding more and more and more of that until you either give up or snap out of it and change your way of thinking.
Very true.
Yeah, but the funny part of about that story is I went to the World Championships, and when I was sitting with Wayne, I had one of those little yellow disposable Kodak cameras.
Yeah.
And I threw it to Wayne, and I said, empty it. All the pictures on that thing, because, you know, Arnold was my hero, right?
Sure.
He's taken all these pictures, and we got all these pictures. I go to Europe and win the championships. I come back and go back to Vermont, right?
Yeah.
And I tell all my friends, they're like, hey, how was it? I'm like, great, I won the championships, but even better, dude, I got to meet Arnold. They're like, yeah, bull, you did not, and this and that. I'm like, oh, yeah, I got the pictures being developed. And, dude, my camera went through all the X-ray machines all over Europe.
Oh,
and
no way.
Not one picture on that camera came back. So to this day, I don't think anybody back buys that story.
Man.
But yeah.
People don't realize that that's the reason why we don't have pictures from back then, is there was no cell phones. No one had cameras on it. You know,
it was way before that. I mean, Wayne called me from a landline at the gym.
That's crazy.
That's how, you know the deal. Arne List, you have a phone call.
Yeah, you have to get tracked down. Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, you go up there, hello. But so much has changed. I mean, not just in the sport, obviously, but technology and everything. It's just incredible.
It's amazing that people actually were able to get together back then, right? Like, they were actually able to coordinate things, right, without a cell phone.
People would actually talk to each other in person, have a conversation. You know, I think that's a very big part of, you know, I have 6 kids, so you oftentimes see kids that are, let's say, I don't know, 25 and younger maybe. Sometimes they lack the social skills because they're not really used to being around people.
Yeah.
I mean, kids are they can text. You know, you don't have to talk to anybody anymore if you don't want to. You can text, Skype, WhatsApp. You can do all of it virtually, and you never have to see another human being if that's the life you want.
I say it all the time. I said, you know, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, you know, people would go out like to clubs and actually interact with each other. Now when people go out, if they even do anymore, they just look at their phone the whole time. It's like they don't even acknowledge each other. They're almost like texting each other. They can be sitting next to each other, you know?
It happens a lot. And it's not just because you would think it's, you know, here, look at, I mean, you know how some people operate. You'll have 4 or 5 people, and if somebody wants to say something about the other person to this one, they can text, right? But it's not even that anymore. It can be 2 people sitting right next to each other, and they're texting each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah,
and that's, you know, and that's part of, you know, we'll get to it in another episode, but it's part of, I think, what breeds a certain kind of lack of compassion and empathy for other people and their experience and the reality, because it's easy to sit behind your phone or virtually somewhere and say whatever you want to say.
We talk about autism. We're making ourselves autistic, actually, because we act autistic even if we're not, because we're just like these non-emotional creatures with this device in front of our face at all times. And I'm just as guilty as everyone else, believe me. I take full 100%. Responsibility.
No, you're right, and the emotional part is really the part that's missing in that. I mean, you can be texting somebody, and because there's no emotion or tone behind it, they get the totally wrong impression.
Happens all the time to me.
You know what I mean? You can be saying somebody "I love you," and they feel like you just said "F you."
Yeah.
Because of whatever there is going on in their head, and it creates a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. But yeah, I mean, I had some interesting interactions. One actually that Arnold doesn't even know about. I mean, I did a photo shoot in his house, one of his houses.
Oh, really?
That he never knew I was even there.
How was that? Yeah. How did that come about?
So I became very close with Artie Zeller, and Artie was, as we all know, he was classic, photographer. His black and whites of Arnold. Really, in my opinion, Artie was one of the, besides Joe Weider, he was one of the probably top three. I think Artie, in my opinion, Artie, Arnold, and Joe Weider created bodybuilding.
Interesting.
Those three people and what they brought to the table and how it all came about, and this is just my opinion, and probably because I had a little bit of interaction with all of them, but I knew what they did. So when I was getting ready for the 96 Nationals, it was I don't know if you ever saw the cover I did for Muscle and Fitness. I was riding a white stallion.
That was a great cover. And, I remember that.
Yeah,
we'll see if we can find
Artie,
it.
Yeah, so Artie took that picture. So that's around the time, when
Where
I
was that
still
picture taken?
It was taken up in like at a ranch up. I mean, it's been so long ago. It's probably, I want to say like Burbank area or something. There's some equestrian places over there, and
Right.
So, but around that time, he used to call me and we'd do photo shoots, or I would actually go and sit and have tea with him and his wife Josie. They lived in Santa Monica, and very humble, and I would go and chat with them, and it was really nice. So he called me one time and says, "Hey, I got a special place to do a photo shoot with you. Like, can you come get me?" So I'd go pick him up, and so we went to Westwood. We went to this huge mansion in Westwood, and it was all stone, and it had the horses' heads out by the lawn, and a big property, and it was deserted. It was empty.
Really?
There was no pool. There was no water in the pool. That kind of deserted.
Okay. It looked like it was going to be sold or something like that, maybe?
No, it was just sitting there, And so he had the key. We went in. We're taking all these pictures and got some beautiful. Some of the lighting that Artie did was just incredible. And so at the end of the picture, when we were done, he didn't tell me until we were done. He said, "This is one of Arnold's mansions." He said,
one of his mansions.
He said, "Yeah." He said he had given me the keys a little while ago and told me if I had something special to shoot that I could use the property. And he said, "You're that something special."
Wow.
And it was just, that was a very moving time for me. Here I was, at that time I was probably maybe 30, something like that.
Right.
Or 31, I guess it was, or 27, 8, whatever. And there I was. It's another moment where I was like, man, it dawned on me after. Here I am doing a photo shoot in Arnold's, one of his houses with pretty much his personal photographer. A lot of the stuff that Artie did for Arnold and with Arnold. And there I was. And it was just one of those things that it's like, you start to see your life taken on a trajectory to where it's going to intersect with certain people. I don't know if you've had that experience where it's your life is going in a certain direction, and then once something happens, it's almost anticlimactic because you've been imagining and you've been thinking about this and feeling like this is going to happen at some point, and it just gets closer and closer and closer until boom, that happens.
That's amazing. I didn't realize you had such crazy contacts and stuff like that with guys like Arnold and Artie Zeller, and because those guys, like as you said, are really the founding fathers of bodybuilding. Now, when did you make the move from Vermont out to Venice?
So I moved to Venice in '91, And this is another thing that a lot of people, I don't think really understand how much Ed Connors, who at the time was one of the owners of Gold, Ed has been so instrumental in helping facilitate different bodybuilders and people in the fitness industry, because so many people in that space wanted to be in Venice at the time, and they and they still do. And Ed was a guy that he has done so much for so many. He's kind of, I see him in a lot of ways as really an unsung hero in bodybuilding.
Yeah, I've had him on the show before. He's discovered a lot of talent too. A tremendous amount of people.
I mean, these are guys. I mean, he from like say Paul DeMeo and Jay Cutler, Mike Matarazzo, all those guys from back east. I'm not going to say all of them, but a good majority of them, including myself. If it wasn't for Ed Connors, we probably would have not ever gone as far in bodybuilding, because we wouldn't have been able to make that jump from the East Coast to Los Angeles.
Did you stay in his house on the beach in Venice there?
I did. Yeah.
Great house.
Connors Hotel. So what happened was, so I had come to LA. I mean, after I won the World Championships in '88, then I really realized, okay, you know what? The place to be is the Mecca.
Right.
I gotta get to Golds. I mean, I gotta go. I have to be there. So I put together some money to take a 2-week vacation, and I went out to LA and I stayed for 2 weeks.
Right.
And it was amazing. You're on the beach, you're in the sun, the gym, and that's just that gym at the time was the only gym in the world like that.
Yeah, and you were a Vermont guy. It was fucking probably freezing back where you were from,
Dude. Yeah, I mean, Wayne D'Amelia used to call me the maple syrup kid. You know what I mean? I was a kid really. So anyway, I came out here, and I was there for 2 weeks, and I loved it, and I didn't have any plan of how to figure out how to stay there. Right. And I was literally walking out of the gym with my bag to go to LAX, and I met Ed Connors in the doorway.
Wow.
I didn't know who he was. I never saw him before, and whatever. And so we started having a conversation, and he offered me a job.
Really?
He asked.
Just as you were heading back home? That's crazy.
I was literally leaving to go to LAX. I wasn't planning to go back to the firehouse and all. Right. I was right from there to LAX, and here I was in this doorway. People talk about sometimes you're in doorways in your life. Well, this was a literal doorway. I'm standing there. The lobby there at Gold.
Of course.
I'm in the doorway. We start chatting, and he offers me a job. And this is probably the 3rd week of October.
Wow.
And so it was right around this time, so I'm like, wow, that sounds really awesome, but I'm leaving. I'm going to LAX. I'm going back to Vermont. Let me think about it, right? So I went back home, and the first day of November, 1991, we got our first snowfall up in Vermont. It was probably 10 inches of snow.
You're like, I'm out of here, man.
It was like, I'm done. So I took some stuff I just loaded up. I had a little Toyota pickup truck, threw some stuff in there. I called my high school sweetheart at the time, said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm moving to LA. You want to come with me?
Right.
I'm leaving in 3 hours, like total silence. And she goes, yeah, let's do it. She goes, yeah, let's do it. Right.
She went with you? Wow.
I went and picked her up. We drove across the country. We got there in 5 days. And I stayed for a few weeks. I stayed at Ed's house on the beach. He was hardly ever there. I mean, he was always running around in Palm Springs and the gym and this and that. He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
And so for the first few weeks, I was a security guard over on Maxella in Glencoe. There was a lot of bodybuilders. I don't know if you remember Jeff Sneed.
Yeah.
Jeff was a security. There was a lot of guys that were security guards over there. And, in the early 90s, Venice was, and it was a rough area.
Yeah.
It was gangs, it was Bloods and Crips and white supremacists. I mean, all of it. So, we were either dodging bullets over there or we were dodging them over in Venice around Gold's, because Gold's was right in the footprint between Lincoln. Oh, yeah, from Rose Avenue to Venice, Lincoln to the beach was hardcore Bloods and Crips.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Dude, Dave, you could hear there were shootings from the gym. I mean, around the gym, you could hear them. And 7th Street was a no-go street. You literally did not go on 7th Street unless you lived there or you might get shot.
Wow. Who knew that? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie American History X?
Yeah, of course.
That movie was filmed in Venice, and everything in that movie was going on in that just little square footage that I just described to you.
Wow. I wonder why Ed decided to put Gold's Gym there.
I don't really know. I don't know the story. I mean,
I got to ask him that.
It's great. It's a great location, and they when I got there was only the first room. So that first room is probably maybe, I don't know, 10,000 square feet or something. Right. And then they expanded into the second room.
What was next door? What was in there? Do you remember at the time?
I don't even remember, because when you go to that gym, at least for myself, I was very, very focused. I was just there to train and leave. Mm-hmm. And so whatever was going on around it at the time, I had really no interest and no idea. Eventually it evolved into Gold's. They put their corporate office upstairs, and that might have been there. I think that was there when I first got there, and then they took over the downstairs and then the third room, and now that whole thing is, it is what it is.
Now, when you started working there, what were you doing? Training people?
No. So I was just straight up sales. Right? I was the front desk guy in the morning. I was the kid that could get up early enough to let all the people in that were sitting out in the parking lot at 5 o'clock. Make sure I showed up on time, right? I mean, I grew up on a farm until I was 13, so I knew what it was like to get up and go have to, feed the animals and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so I started out as just doing sales, but the beauty of it was, at that time, personal training was nothing like it is today. Right. No, people were not certified. They weren't insured, and frankly, a lot of them weren't qualified. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of people that were training other people in the gym, but quite a few people that probably were doing more harm than good. Sure. In fairness. And so what happened for me was I had if somebody's going to train with a trainer, they're typically going to ask right after they sign up for a membership or during that process. Sure. So after a while, a couple of times around, I'd be selling memberships, and then I would see this person then later training with somebody else. They would ask, and I had an appointment book. I would just open the book, and I'd say, sure, what time you have in mind? They would give me a couple times, and I would train them, and then that evolved into, I had probably 3-4 people that I would give what I couldn't take. I made way more money training people there than I ever made. Sure.
And Ed was cool about that. I don't think the gym took any money from you guys, did they?
No, they didn't. But I wouldn't have complained if they had. I mean, it was. Sure. I was working for the gym, and I was getting. I mean, you could have maybe in some people's eyes, they would have seen it maybe as a conflict of interest. Yeah. But I knew that I was doing a good thing for these people. But I mean, that in the '90s, I had to be making close to $15,000 a month training people. Wow, so that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. You were there all the time too. I remember when I would go to Gold's Vegas.
I was there all the time. I was there all the time, Dave, and that's probably why I don't want to be in a gym anymore. I just can't. It's not for me. I mean, my life now has evolved into something that's so much greater than the gym experience, although so much of who I am is from my gym experience. Yeah. Well,
your life is pretty elaborate. We're gonna have, like you said earlier, we're gonna make this a multi-part. But I gotta ask you about the Craig Titus incident, because I know that you and Craig Titus had a fight in the gym, or actually, I think Craig just kind of cheap shotted you in the gym. What was that whole story? Give me the whole background behind that story.
Yeah. So I met Craig. I had met him I had seen him, and because we competed at different shows. In the same show, but not in the same class. Right. I didn't become a heavyweight until 2000, and Craig was, for the most part, I think the whole time I knew him, he was a heavyweight. Yeah. And I think he was over 230 or something. Mm-hmm. So he was always considerably bigger than me. And Craig and I had developed, I thought it was a friendship, but it turned out to be not what I thought it was. Craig was I had helped Craig out a couple of times. And he was arrested at one point for, I think it was, possession of ecstasy, or I don't remember what.
Yeah, it was ecstasy. Yeah, he had.
So, and he asked me to bail him out of jail.
Oh, you bailed him out?
I did.
Wow.
Yep. I bailed out Craig. When you do that, it's not a joke. And if I could give anybody a piece of advice, really think long and hard before you do that for somebody, because oftentimes what they really need is to sit in jail. And no, really, to think about how did they get there.
Right.
I mean, I have my own experience. I went to jail for 30 days, and it was one of the best experiences of my whole life. But we'll get to that if we want to. So when you do that, you put your house up. You know, you don't pay the total bail amount. His bail, I think, was $50,000.
Wow.
And I put up $5,000. You pay 10%.
Sure.
But if they don't show up in court, the court wants the other $45,000. Sure. So you're putting yourself on the hook for whatever the total bail amount is, even though you only have to put up 10%.
But that 10% you lose, don't you? You lose that 10%?
Well, I did. I'll tell you the story. So anyway, time went by, and then Etty had Etty, who I married, she had a clothing line, and Craig and I did, and Rick Valeni and Cheryl. These names are crazy to come back.
No,
like
yeah,
this,
keep saying them. We love them. I know them.
We did a photo shoot and this and that, and so I had some interaction with Craig, and Craig was supposed to be kind of like our I don't know if endorser is the right word, but he was going to wear all of our sporting.
What was
wear,
the name
whatever.
of the clothing line?
Buy American.
Okay.
So yeah, and actually, Etty and her dad did a lot of the really hideous looking products for the casinos in Vegas. The jackets with the huge embroidering stuff. They had a decent business, and so we got into the body wear or whatever.
What was your girlfriend's name at the time?
Etty.
What's her last name?
Azule.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have 4 boys together now. So anyway, all Jewish boys too, Dave. And
really? Wow.
Yeah. So Etty was born in Israel.
Half Jewish, so they're like me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. So is your dad Jewish and your mom?
No, my mom was Jewish, so I'm considered Jewish, right?
You're considered Jewish, my friend. Yeah. So where's your kippah and your tzitzit?
There you go.
My kids go to Hebrew school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so here's what happens. I mean, Craig gets out of jail and this and that, and then I want my $5,000.
Of course, right.
Right. I mean, that's the deal we had. I'll give you the money, but you got to pay me back and this and that.
Yeah, you weren't asking for interest. You just wanted the money back. You did it as a favor.
No, I wasn't in the business. I don't loan money for interest. It's against the teachings of the Torah. So, at least to a fellow Jew. Anyway, so anyway, I'd asked him a few times for the money and this and that, and didn't get an answer. And so, I finally, now when this happened, I wasn't really training, and it wouldn't have probably mattered if I was, but I was probably maybe 185 pounds, maybe 190. Okay. I never really carried a huge amount of weight around.
What year was this, by the way?
Probably 97, 8. Okay. I'm not sure.
Sure.
So anyway, I was in the gym a lot. So, he was training, and he was now in the second room, and he was on the treadmill. And so the treadmill at Gold's is a very interesting place because once somebody gets on the treadmill, they're going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
Okay? And a lot of people, because I worked at the gym, I would see guys use that to try to hit on girls in the gym because they would go and stand next to, and the girl couldn't go anywhere. She was committed to a half hour.
Right?
So anyway, so he's over on the treadmill, and around him, I think, was Rico, Chris Cormier, and I think Flex was there.
Okay.
And so I just walked up to him, and he was facing away from me, facing the mirror, and I walked up so he could see me coming up,
Sure.
And I was like, "Hey, Craig, what's up?" I said, "I just need to know. Just tell me straight up. Are you going to pay me my $5,000?" Right. He goes, "I don't owe you any money." He goes, "I don't owe you any money."
Oh, my God.
I said, "Okay." I go, "Craig," I said, "Listen." I said, "Man, you're living in such a pipe dream world." I said, "You think you're going to be Mr. Olympia too, and that ain't never going to happen." Now you go, dude, he lost it. Yeah, I mean, it was the truth, right? So, and he lost it. He got off, and I'm not going to say that Craig sucker punched me, because I don't think that would be fair to him, really. I mean, he just look at it. I mean, he came off that treadmill, and I was standing there, and there was such rage in his face, and he punched me right in the face. I still have a little scar under here.
Really?
And, yeah. I mean, I think he was like 270 at the time, 260, something like that,
Holy
and he just
shit.
boom, punched me right in the face. And didn't knock me out. I don't know how, but I went back like that, and then I went forward, and all I could do was grab him around the legs, and we ended up on the floor. And it's probably a good thing that Rico and Chris and Kenny were there, because they grabbed him.
Yeah.
They grabbed him, and he would have. I mean, look, a guy that size hit me like that.
He was a good fighter too. He could fight. Yeah.
He was a guy that whatever. I mean, he was a little rough around the edges.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He wasn't afraid to get into it. I mean, I've never been afraid to get into it. I just wasn't expecting it, and he probably would have crushed me anyway at the time. It just, it's just the way it is. But I don't want to say that he sucker punched me, because that's just. I'm a believer in the truth.
Well, yeah, but you weren't ready for it. I
I wasn't ready for it, but I should have. When I saw his face, I should have known it was coming.
And this was before he turned pro too, right?
Right around that time.
Yeah. So he probably still thought he was going to be Mr. Olympia. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and then Etty. I mean, she's Moroccan, so she's half. They have their own history of. She actually got in his face, and he was going to hit her.
Really? Oh, he was that enraged. Wow.
He was about to punch her, and she was like, "Go ahead, hit me. Go ahead." Because if he had touched her, I mean, those three other guys would have.
They would have killed him. Yeah.
Probably would have been really ugly.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the thing. So I never got my money from Craig.
Wow.
And,
didn't Ed kick Craig out of the gym for a while?
Yeah, I think we both got kicked out of the gym.
Oh, you both did? You got got punched out, and you got kicked out too?
Yeah. I think at that time, I think they had video camera. I don't remember the deal, but just big deal. I got punched, and I got kicked out of the gym, and it was kind of a foreshadow of where my life was going. I wasn't going to be in the gym anymore. Yeah. But it was. I don't regret it, and I think we all know what happened to Craig.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people. There's a lot. I mean, like I said, I ended up in jail for 30 days myself.
What did you go to jail? What did you go to jail over?
Growth hormone.
Oh, was it? Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, 2009. 2009 for something I did in 1999.
Oh, really? Wow.
10 years. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Isn't there a statute of limitations on that stuff?
There is. Yeah, there is. It's 5 years, and I thought I was off the hook, but I guess I wasn't. Yeah, wow. I've been through a bit. We had a situation. I ended up. I mean, look, if you know the '90s, you know that growth hormone changed everything.
Yeah,
it changed bodybuilding. It changed all the professional sports, because growth hormone became available in such a huge amount in the black market.
Right.
Because really what was happening with the HIV and the AIDS, and the state of California was giving these guys 4 boxes of growth hormone a month.
They only
and most of those guys, most of those guys came from the party world, and they never touched it. They bought party drugs, and sadly a lot of them just partied themselves to death, and they sold the growth hormone to buy other party drugs.
Right.
And so that created a big access to product in the black market. They would sell it between maybe $275 and $500 a box,
which is nothing.
And
for 126 IUs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think the cost of that at the pharmacy is like $10,000.
I think it was for all 4 of them. Yeah, I think it was $1,500 to $2,000 a box. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to make things sound better for your show, Dave.
Yeah.
So anyway, what happened was there was 2 gyms in LA that really, in my opinion, changed all sports. Gold's Gym in Venice and Gold's Gym in Hollywood on Cole Avenue.
Right.
And the reason is you could get growth hormone there.
Yeah, that's where all the AIDS guys were trained, right?
You could get a lot of it. And what happened was, if you look at how bodybuilding has changed, where there was a time, like if you wanted to be a top bodybuilder in the world, you had to come to Southern California.
Yeah.
And frankly, because that's where the gear was.
Yeah.
You could get stuff there. But now things have changed where you have some of the top guys training, I don't really know because I'm not into it, but they train all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's because the distribution of things has changed and you have access to stuff. So anyway, long story short, I'm always an entrepreneur. I ended up getting a drug wholesaler's license in the state of California.
Right.
And I ended up meeting a guy in Florida that was moving a lot of growth hormone, a lot. And he told me it was for kids in Africa that were suffering with HIV and AIDS, and he couldn't get any more medication.
Right.
And look, the 90s, there was a huge epidemic of HIV in Africa. It's huge. They couldn't get enough medication to these kids. So what happened with me was I was like, you know what? I know this is illegal. Morally, I'm okay with it because there's people here that are not going to use it. There's kids over there that are dying that need it. So I'm going to do everything by the book as much as I can. I'm not going to try to hide this. I got a license and everything, did everything with wires and this and that. Well, what I didn't know is this particular guy, the DEA, the FBI, the IRS, the ATF, they were already watching this guy. And I didn't realize until a special agent from the FDA showed up at my house in Studio City. Actually, I wasn't there. He knocked on the door, and he had called me at work and said, you need to come home. Came home, and, at first I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
That old thing, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't have even talked. You shouldn't have even talked. You should have given your lawyer's number, but yeah.
Well, no, it all worked out. But what happened was, he had told me that my license in Vermont was connected with $50 million worth of counterfeit Lipitor.
How did that happen?
Well, that happened because in Vermont, to get a license as a wholesaler, you have to have a business address. So I got a warehouse in Vermont with a physical address, and it was solely for the purposes of getting my license.
Right.
And I would have a family member would go and check for mail once a week or whatever. And she called me one time from the location and said, have you been here recently? And I said, no. Why? What's going on? She goes, there's a bunch of empty boxes here. I said, well, what are they? She goes, hold on. She comes back and she says, there are boxes, they say Lipitor on them.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, right? Now, luckily, thank God, that happened to me before the guy from the FDA showed at the house.
Right.
So the guy was trying to frame me. So
really?
I knew So that's what happened. 5 years later, I thought it was out. The last month, they called me and said, okay, we gotta talk now. So,
How many?
But anyway,
how much money were you making a month with all that stuff you were doing?
Dave, you gotta go there.
I have to. I gotta know.
So yeah, of course. I mean, inquiring people want to know, right, Dave? So, I think what happens a lot of times, and I'm gonna get to your answer. A lot of times when we do things that are dishonest, illegal, unethical, we end up with nothing in the long run.
Of course, lawyer fees.
So there's a lesson for all of us there. But I was sending 100 boxes of growth hormone at a time at $600 a pop.
Wow.
And at least twice a month.
Whoa.
So, yeah, and I was probably making 10 to 15,000 on each shipment.
Wow, that's great.
It wasn't. I mean, I thought it was, but I didn't keep any of it.
Did you have a fine? Did you have to pay a fine?
Nope.
Lawyer fees?
I did 3 years of probation and 30 days in jail.
You're lucky. That's nothing.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. It's not what, I was looking at somewhere closer to 7 to 10 years.
Yeah. How did you get out of that?
Well, like I said, I mean, you can probably connect the dots, but the guy in Florida, they were looking for this guy. They were so far onto him, and
gotcha.
Before too long, I was sitting there with all these different agencies across from me at a table saying, look, we understand your situation, and this is what we would like you to do. And if you're willing to help us, we can figure something out. If not, good luck. And so because of the fact that I knew this guy had already he was up to no good with me, and he had shared a story with me that he had framed some other guy years before.
Shit. Yeah.
So sometimes when people talk, if you listen to people and remember and stuff, luckily I put all this together, and I was like, he's not looking out for me. So I have kids and a family, and
sure.
you know, I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, he's a rat and this and that. Like, I get that conversation. I know that I'm a good person, and I also know that he had an opportunity to do the right thing as well.
Right.
But this guy lawyered up and thought he was going to beat the whole thing, and it didn't work out for him. You know?
It's terrible. It's, you know, it's different parts of our life, things we do, and the decisions that we make. You know, we look back, we're like, what the fuck were we thinking? You know, and you know, it happened to me in my life too. So, you know.
You know what, Dave? You're 100% right, and this is part of why I got out of bodybuilding. I mean, I'll share with you in a little bit how that happened. But when you're in that bodybuilding, you know, I'm not even going to say mindset, and I will say addiction, even though, you know, steroids and growth, they're not an addictive type of thing, but you get addicted to the feeling of you're the alpha male, you're in the zone and all this kind of stuff. It's a difficult life to get out of. It's really a difficult life. And you see people trying to get out of it. They say they're off, but they're really not. And then, you know, we see these guys passing away every 6-8 months. It's somebody else that we know. They've got all this internal damage. And you look at them, people like, can you believe so-and-so passed away? It's like, I'm surprised he lived as long as he did. You know? But what happens is when you fill your body with all these different things and your hormone levels are so high, you're not thinking straight.
Yeah.
You're literally not thinking straight. And if a person would, for myself, if I had stepped back, like for me to look at that time in my life now, I'm like, wow, man, I was so out of balance in so many things. And I looked, you know, everything looked great, right? Yeah. Arnie's, you know, on the cover of the magazine. He's got the new Lexus, all this stuff, but you're a mess.
Yeah.
You're a mess. Yeah, you're not you, me. I guess I can only...
Did you ever get into Newbane?
Never.
No? That was big out in Venice. That's why I wanted to ask. You know, I got hooked on that.
No, that was the demise of a lot of guys. It started, you know, look, there's no other way to put it. When you're a top bodybuilder, you're putting a needle in your body more than once a day, a lot of times every single day.
Yeah.
You're taking 2 shots of growth hormone, 2 shots of insulin, a shot of at least of some kind of, you know, testosterone and whatever you can get your hands on. And in the 90s, that's when you started having synthol come in.
Right. And,
you know, so you're taking all these different, and so to take a shot of Newbane, who cares? It's just another needle. But now it's got you're high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I never tried it. Thank God.
You're lucky Craig punched you out, because he probably would have got you hooked on Newbane too.
So. He probably knocked some sense into me. Maybe he knocked some sense into me. It created a spiral for a lot of guys.
Yeah. Let's end part 1 on this final question, which a lot of people ask me. Were you upset that you didn't turn pro? Because you were so close.
No, I never was upset about it. I'm actually grateful I did not.
Mm-hmm. Why?
Because I'd be dead by now.
You really believe that?
100%. Sure. You know, yeah, and I mean, I'll share with you how that happened to me, how I got out of it, and how it was a decision that was so easy for me. It was 2000, and you know, in 2000, what they did, I always did my best competitively in the light heavyweight. Right, up to 198 and a quarter, but I always felt like, you know, I'd always looked at guys like Sean Ray, because Sean was about the same height as me. I mean, I think maybe I'm a little taller. I don't know. He says he's 5'7", maybe he's 5. I don't know.
He's definitely shorter than 5'7". Yeah.
Yeah, I maybe, I don't know, 5'8", 5'7". Yeah. I think he's 5'6". But anyway, I think he weighed around 212, 215, something like that, when he was really in top shape, I thought. And so I always wanted to try to compete at, like, say, 215, 212, but I didn't want to be against the guys like yourself that were like 270. You know, it was a different level of size, you know. And so in 2000 they created the super heavyweight class.
Exactly.
So, yep, everybody from 222 and over was a super heavyweight, and everybody from 198 to 222 was a heavyweight.
225, yeah.
Yeah, was it 225?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, okay, stats. So anyway, so I, look, I was training with Charles last time, and I always train with Charles. And I was like, dude, this is the year, man. I'm ready. Let's beef it up a bit. So, at that time now, I'm 35 years old at that time. So you don't just put on 20 pounds of muscle because you're going to eat more steak and you're going to do another plate on whatever. You're going to do the chemistry.
Sure.
It is what it is. So, I started taking a lot more than I ever took, and I don't know what these standards are by today, but I went up to 9 IUs of growth hormone a day, which I never had done.
It's a lot, and you had real growth hormone too back then.
yeah, which always helps.
Yeah.
So and I did insulin for the first time.
Right.
Which is really dangerous. Almost died from that a couple times.
What'd you take, Humulin R or Humalog?
Humulin R.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, so I went from, 198 to, I was like 6 weeks out, I was like 230.
Wow.
And, at that time, again, it was before social media really started to happen and everything. It was 2000, the internet was out, but a lot of people like myself thought it was never going to amount to anything, right? So it was too slow. You had to do dial up, whatever. So anyway, I was 6 weeks out. And, the bodybuilding community, it's a tight knit. You kind of know who's looking how. Right. Because we're training them and this and that. And at the nationals, you just had to win your weight class. And so I was 6 weeks out, and I looked like I never looked before, Dave. I never thought I would look like that. Mm-hmm. And, the word started to get out that, hey, wow, Arnie's looking really good, and he maybe has got a shot at the whole thing, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was 6 weeks out, and Etty and I lived we had a 2-story house, and my daughters, Rachel and Michelle, who are now 23 and 25, they were 3 and 5. They were 3 and 5. And they were, my younger one, Michelle, is 5'10", full grown. So at 3, she was like this. Mm-hmm. And so I was home I had trained in the morning, and I was home, and I was trying to take a nap. That whole routine. Sure. And my daughters were downstairs, and they were goofing around, having fun, and they were laughing and giggling, and it was keeping me from sleeping. And the more fun they were having, Dave,
you lost your mind?
The more upset I got.
Yeah.
Because here they were, I was trying to sleep, and I ran downstairs, and I never laid a hand on either one of them, but man, I yelled at them in the way that was sinful. It was really sinful, and I scared them so bad. And I don't know, you ever seen the cartoon characters where the characters' eyes go big and they bounce off each other? That was my daughters.
Wow.
So I told them to get upstairs and go in their room and don't come out. They ran upstairs, and I went into the kitchen. I was looking for something to eat. It sounds so stupid to say now, but I was sitting there looking for something to eat, and I heard one of them talking. And I was like, oh, now I'm really pissed because one of them went in the other one's room. Right. And now I'm going to go catch them. So I went to the stairs, and I was walking up the stairs, and the house was laid out to where as you come up the stairs at the landing, you could look right into my 3-year-old's bedroom through the banisters, the railing. And so I'm coming up the stairs. I can hear her talking. I can't hear what she's saying. And as I come up the landing, my 3-year-old daughter, she's walking around in circles praying the Our Father. Yeah. And she's asking God to protect her from me.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. You have kids, right?
Yeah, no.
My whole life changed. I ran in there. I was crying. I called in my other daughter. I told him how sorry I was. I would never do this again, and go play and do what you want to do. And I went in my room, and I laid down in my bed, and I cried it was like water was coming out of my face from a water fountain. Oh, yeah, that's the worst thing. Yeah, and then Etty wasn't even in the house. She was in the guest house, so she didn't hear anything that was going on. She comes up to the room. She's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I never saw you like this. What's the matter? I go, I don't want this anymore. She goes, don't want what? What are you talking about? I said, the bodybuilding thing. I'm done. She's like, Arne, you've been training since you're 15 years old. You're about to get your pro card. Now you don't want it? I said, I'm totally done. I said, God spoke to me through my kids and my circumstance.
Yeah.
When this is over, I'm never doing this again.
Wow.
And so, I was 6 weeks out, and in that moment when I knew my life was going to go in a different way, you can't train at that level when your heart's not in it anymore.
Sure.
I just knew it wasn't for me. I went to the show because I wanted to go to New York and take her to the city and all that all that. Yeah. But I mean, I placed 13th, which was worse than I ever did ever. But I was so happy. I knew I was so liberated, Dave. I would never do that.
Yeah. Uh-oh. I think he got a phone call. God called him. It's funny. I was in that show, actually, the 2000 Nationals. It was in New York City. First time I think it had ever been in New York City, at least in my wheelhouse. And I'm just telling the story, Arne, about that Nationals in 2000 because I was in that show as well, and I thought I was going to do really well there, and I didn't. I wound up not placing, which was kind of really upsetting to me. But so that was your last show, huh? That was it. You just walked away.
That was my last show. That was my last show, and then when I got back to Venice, I moved to the Valley. That was it, and I never went back.
Wow.
I just evaporated. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing.
What did you do for money, though? That was your whole life. You were making your money from that.
Well, no, actually, by that time, I wasn't making money from that. I had got out of training people. I did very well making an herbal weight loss product.
Oh, okay.
I did very well with that.
What was it
Then
called?
the FDA banned. There was an herb called Ma Wong, ephedra.
Sure. Yeah.
So that got banned. That went away. It became a real estate finance
what was
guy.
what was the product you were selling though?
It was my own line.
What was it called?
It was my own line. It was called Homeopower, like homeopathy.
Yeah.
It was all herbs. But I wasn't in the I wasn't even in the bodybuilding space. I was one of my clients. She lost 150 pounds on my product.
Right.
And her daughter was training to be on the U.S. Equestrian Olympic, the jumpers, the horses.
Yeah, sure.
It's a very expensive sport. You know what I mean? So this lady was traveling around with the Levi family and all these. And so before too long, everybody around the world that was in that line of endeavor was on my product. Even if they didn't need to lose weight, they just liked the feeling and wanted to stay.
You had everyone high on stimulants. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I did that. And then when the FDA banned the herb, I became a real estate and then became a broker, had a business of my own with my brother-in-law, and we did pretty well. We did very well, and then the real estate market crashed. And that's when I really had I did some soul searching, and that's when I decided I wanted to write a screenplay. 2 screenplays, actually, in 2009.
Yeah, and we're going to stop, and I'm going to stop you here because now the story gets even more interesting. People think that the bodybuilding was interesting. I think the second half of your life story is even more interesting, and the people you encountered. And we're going to save that for next week. You're going to come back. We're going to do part 2 with Arne List.
Perfect.
And we're going to find out where you are now and what you're doing and what your future projects are, because I think you have a very interesting life, and I learned some stuff about you I didn't even know, and so I think that this is going to, a lot of the groundwork you laid early in your life really had an impact on what you did later.
100%, 100%. And like we said the other day, David, nothing happens by accident.
Yeah.
Here I am, you're Jewish. We have this commonality that before it was just bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Where now, because we're having a conversation, right, we're getting to know the human being and the story behind them. If you talk to somebody long enough, I don't care who it is, I can take anybody off the street and start talking to them. And if I talk to them typically it takes less than 5 minutes. You start talking, and if they're open to the conversation before too long, boom, you have something in common. Right. You know some of the same people. You had a similar experience. Right. You're from the same place, So it's really about understanding and reaching that common ground that is a place that we can then build on, because we all share a commonality. First of all, we're all human beings, right? So we have that in common, right? But so often people get tied up on the things that we don't have in common, and they get wound up and upset about them. And that's part of what creates a problem for some people. They lose sight of, we're all here as God's children, and we're all here for, as part of humanity in this shared experience. And, I'm bodybuilding was a great experience for me. I wouldn't repeat it, only because I got so far into the steroids and the growth hormone and stuff. I would never want my kids doing it. I'm very much about, I've always been into athletics, and there's a lot of really, really talented bodybuilders that were very talented in sports.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes they typically got into bodybuilding through weight training for football, baseball, whatever it was that they were doing.
Yeah.
And then, once the bodybuilding thing gets a hold of somebody at that age, because you're so in control of it, as much as a person can be in control of their life, which we're really, so much of it is out of our control. But I think a lot of times guys and girls get into bodybuilding in their teenage years when so many things in their life are happening with their body, with their life, and there's so much uncertainty that if the right type of personality gets with bodybuilding, they can really do something that's measurable with their life, and they can see the results right away. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. That's how bodybuilding works.
That's how we all get sucked into it initially. But I'm going to stop you here, Arnie. I want to thank you for joining us. Great stories. We'll be back next week with part 2. It gets even crazier. You guys are going to want to hear the rest of this story, I promise you. So don't miss part 2 of this interview. For now, though, I'm Dave Palumbo for Arne List and our producer, Tyler Shore. We'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot, Dave.